Hey everyone, Jahalain here. It's time to dive into a topic that's as fascinating as it is cringeworthy. Buckle up as we explore some of the most shocking medical treatments from history. Treatments that would make even the most iron-stomached among us squirm. We're talking about the kind of medical practices that will leave you wondering, what were they thinking? Welcome to our countdown of the most obscure and dangerous medical treatments from history. You won't believe what people used to think was good for their health. From ancient times through to the not-so-distant past, medical practices often looked a lot different than they do today. Before the scientific method, before germ theory, before penicillin, people relied on a mixture of observation, superstition, and hope to heal the sick. And sometimes those remedies were, well, downright dangerous. But hey, at least they were trying, right? So get ready to be both amazed and slightly horrified. We're about to uncover the wild world of historical medicine, where leeches roamed free and mercury was considered a cure-all. Let's get started. Okay, imagine this. You've got a headache, maybe a fever. What do? Well, if you lived a few centuries ago, your doctor might recommend bloodletting. That's right, draining blood from your body was considered a standard treatment for all sorts of ailments. The idea behind bloodletting stemmed from the ancient theory of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These humours were believed to be the vital fluids controlling your health, and any imbalance meant, you guessed it, time for some bloodletting. Physicians believed that by removing excess blood they could restore balance and cure everything from the plague to a simple cold. They even had fancy charts to determine how much blood to drain based on your age, astrological sign, and the current phase of the moon. Of course, we know now that draining precious blood from an already weakened patient is the last thing you want to do. But hey, at least they were consistent. They really stuck with this practice for over 2,000 years. Next up, we have a procedure that's not for the faint of heart. Literally, it's called trepanation, and it involves drilling holes into the skull. You heard that right. Archaeological evidence suggests that this practice dates back thousands of years, and surprisingly, it wasn't always about torture or ritual sacrifice. In ancient times, trepanation was believed to cure a whole host of ailments, from headaches and seizures to mental illnesses and even demonic possession. The idea was that by creating an opening in the skull, they could release evil spirits or relieve pressure on the brain. And believe it or not, there's evidence that some people actually survived this procedure, as evidenced by skulls showing signs of healing. Now, I know what you're thinking. They perform brain surgery with crude tools and without anesthesia? Yikes! And you'd be right, while the thought of trepanation might make your head spin, pun intended. It's a fascinating example of early attempts to understand and treat the mysteries of the human brain. Chapter 3. Mercury, the shimmering quicksilver metal that's as fascinating as it is toxic. And guess what? People once thought it had healing properties. I know, right? It sounds crazy, but mercury was a popular treatment for various ailments, most notably syphilis. Now, syphilis is a serious bacterial infection, and back then they didn't have antibiotics. So doctors turned to mercury, administering it in various forms, including pills, ointments, and even vapor baths. The idea was that mercury's toxic effects would somehow kill the syphilis bacteria, and sometimes it did work, but at a terrible cost. You see, mercury poisoning is no joke. It can lead to a whole host of horrific side effects, including organ damage, neurological problems, and even death. In fact, the phrase "mad as a hatter" is thought to have originated from the mercury poisoning experienced by hat makers who used mercury in their craft. So, while mercury might have provided temporary relief from syphilis, the long-term consequences were often far, far worse. Chapter 4. Moving into the 20th century, we encounter a procedure that's both fascinating and deeply disturbing: the lobotomy. This neurosurgical procedure involves severing connections in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for personality, emotions, and decision-making. Developed in the 1930s, lobotomies were seen as a miracle cure for severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe depression. The idea was that by disrupting the neural pathways, they could alleviate the symptoms of these debilitating conditions. And while lobotomies did sometimes result in a decrease in symptoms, the cost was often devastating. Patients who underwent lobotomies often experienced profound personality changes, becoming apathetic, emotionally blunted, and even childlike. Some lost their creativity, their spark, their very essence. The procedure was essentially a form of controlled brain damage, and its use quickly fell out of favor as the horrific side effects became impossible to ignore. Chapter 5. Our final stop on this tour of shocking medical treatments takes us to the early 20th century, where the discovery of radium sparked both excitement and, as we now know, serious health concerns. Radium, a radioactive element, was initially hailed as a miracle cure for everything from cancer to arthritis. People were captivated by radium's glow-in-the-dark properties, and its use quickly spread to all sorts of everyday products, from toothpaste and cosmetics to toys and even water. Radium spas popped up, promising rejuvenation and vitality through exposure to radioactive waters. And yes, there were even radium-laced chocolates. But here's the thing about radium. It's highly radioactive, and prolonged exposure can lead to serious health problems, including cancer and radiation sickness. It took time for the dangers of radium to become fully understood, and by then it was too late for many who had embraced this glowing miracle cure. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From bloodletting to lobotomies, we've seen how medical practices have evolved over time and how sometimes those practices were downright dangerous. It's a stark reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and healing can be a double-edged sword. But hey, at least we can look back at these historical blunders and appreciate how far we've come, right? It's easy to judge the medical practices of the past, but it's important to remember that they were often driven by a genuine desire to alleviate suffering. They were working with the knowledge and tools they had at the time, and sometimes that meant taking risks that in hindsight seem utterly baffling. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating and sometimes frightening historical facts. Until next time, stay curious.